Today we're going to take a look at the cheapest Retina 15-inch MacBook Pro that I could find on eBay. This is a late 2013 15-inch MacBook Pro, the base model, and I paid just $500 for this device. Now, that's a pretty incredible deal. It didn't come with an SSD, so I had to put in an SSD, but $500 for a Retina MacBook Pro, a late 2013. So what did my $500 get me? Well, as it turns out, quite a lot. I am actually very surprised at how this computer turned out to be. So, my total investment in this thing, I put $500 into buying the laptop, and I put $100 into a 128GB SSD from a MacBook Air. Now, the specs of this original computer had a 256GB SSD, but the 128 is cheaper, and I'm trying to build this as cheap as possible, so we're basically $600 all in. So, the full specs. This is a late 2013 MacBook Pro with 8GB of RAM and a 2GHz Intel Core i7. Now, that's a Haswell Core i7, so it's pretty power efficient, and it's pretty darn good. I ran Cinebench R15, and it scored about 520, which is not too shabby for a computer of this age. So what about the actual physical computer itself? Well, I plugged the serial number for the computer into a Dutch website that tracks the age of the computer and other detailed statistics. And this is actually, well, it's a late 2013. This particular computer was actually made in mid-June of 2014, so it's not even 4 years old yet. In addition to that, the case is in outstanding physical condition, with almost no wear whatsoever. There's no scratches, there's maybe a few minor scuffs, but other than that, this thing is immaculate. Even the keyboard has no wear on it. And when I looked at the system report, the original battery only has 100 cycles on it. So this thing has not been used much at all, and it's in very, very, very good physical condition. So there's one thing that I want to touch on, which is that in late 2013, 2014, and 2015, the base model MacBook Pros did not include a dedicated graphics card. This is a break with other MacBook Pros, certainly the Retina kind. The mid-2012 and the 2013, every single model had an NVIDIA GT650M, and the late 2013, mid-2014 did not have, or the 2015, did not have graphics cards on the base model. Now, that's not ideal. I'll grant you, it's not great to have a Pro laptop without a graphics card. It would have been a bigger deal when this was new and you were paying $2,000 for it. It's less of a big deal for me paying $600. But there is one thing about lacking a graphics card that I think makes these computers actually a little bit interesting. So the 15-inch MacBook Pros all have two fans. And in most MacBook Pros, like the touch bar ones, which all have dedicated graphics cards, or any of the other models with dedicated graphics cards, those two fans and the heat pipe are responsible for cooling the quad-core i7 as well as the dedicated graphics card. However, in this computer, those two fans and that heat pipe only have to cool the processor. So what that means is this computer actually runs a lot cooler than any other MacBook Pro that I've had with dedicated graphics. So in another video, I showed a 2015, the top spec 2015 model MacBook Pro, which had the Radeon M375X or something. And I actually sold that computer because when I was using it, the fans would spin up and it got very hot. And in fact, most MacBook Pros do that. However, this 2013 one is very cool at all times. Sure, the fans will spin up occasionally, like when I was running Cinebench, but the computer was barely even warm to the touch. So the downside of not having a dedicated graphics card is that gaming performance is going to suffer. However, this computer has the built-in Iris Pro graphics that they introduced with Haswell chips, and they're actually pretty decent, I'm not gonna lie. So basic games like CSGO play very well on this computer. Once I dropped the resolution to 1680 by 1050 and put the settings down a bit to medium lowish, I was getting a pretty constant 60 FPS and with really no issues whatsoever. Another game that works quite well on this machine, I have to say, is Sid Meier's Civilization V. So this game, I didn't play too far into it. I'm sure when you get large empires, the processor will struggle a bit just because of that lower clock speed and the lower tier processor. But I was pulling 60 FPS at 1080p on, or I guess 1200p on this thing, no problem whatsoever. So all in all, I'm really quite surprised at how much I like this computer. I always kind of shied away from the lower tier MacBook Pros, especially the ones that don't have graphics cards. But because of the more effective cooling and the actually surprisingly decent integrated graphics on this Haswell chip, I think that this actually is a pretty decent computer. I'm editing this video on it. It certainly has enough processing power for video editing with that quad-core i7. And honestly, I'm genuinely surprised. Not to mention that for $600, only $600, this thing is absolutely a bargain. Now, you could argue that there are PCs that do the job better, but I'm not really talking about that, okay? This is strictly focusing on a MacBook Pro, and for $600, that's a pretty good deal. So thank you guys for watching this video. Next week, I have a rather different sort of video that I think you guys are going to like, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell so that you get notifications, because next week's video, it's going to be interesting.